Hey everybody, today on Political Access, we're going to do another presidential political shift. This time it's going to be two consecutive elections, 1968 and 1972. So let's put up a little bit of background about these two elections. 1968, Richard Nixon won his first term. He got 301 electoral votes, won 32 states, over 43% of the popular vote. His opponent, Hubert Humphrey, he got 191 electoral votes. He carried 13 states plus D.C. and got a little bit under 43% of the popular vote. There was also a heavy third-party candidate in that election, George Wallace, American Independent. He did win 5 states, good for 46 electoral votes, and got about 13.5% nationally. Much of that was consolidated in the South, especially his home state of Alabama. Now, if we jump ahead to 72, that was the Richard Nixon landslide. That year, he got 520 electoral votes, carried 49 states, over 60% of the popular vote. The Democrat George McGovern, he was only able to carry 1 state plus D.C., good for 17 electoral votes, and got 37.5% of the popular vote. And there was not nearly the significant third-party vote that there was the election prior. So if we come back here to the usual spreadsheet, either you love this thing or you don't, but the states are in the first column. The next column is the 68 Democratic vote, Hubert Humphrey, followed by the 68 Republican vote, Richard Nixon. Jump ahead to the 72 Democrat vote, that's George McGovern. The 72 Republican vote, Richard Nixon again. The next column are the Democratic shifts between those two elections, followed by the Republican shifts. And the last column is the net change between the two elections, between the two parties. And I also have shading in this column. The darkest colors are going to be over 10-point shifts. The lightest colors are going to be under 5-point shifts. And minimal spoiler here, these are almost all shifts toward Nixon and the Republicans. So having said all that, let's go through these states. We'll start in Alabama. 1968, Hubert Humphrey only got 18.7% of the popular vote. Richard Nixon did even worse. He got 14%. That was because George Wallace, the third-party candidate, his home state was Alabama. He took home almost 2/3 of that vote. Jump ahead to 1972. George McGovern, he bumped it up to 25.5. Richard Nixon massively bumped it up to 72.4. That's a net gain of 6.8 for the Democrats and a net gain of 58.4 for the Republicans. And take a look at that total shift of 51.6 away from the Democrats and toward the Republicans. Both of them did gain, but Nixon got substantially more than McGovern. George Wallace was not a factor anymore. Nixon was popular, and that is one of the biggest shifts we've ever seen. So now we can quickly go through the rest of these states, and they are going to be all toward the Republicans unless otherwise noted. Alaska got redder by 20.9, Arizona 11.4, Arkansas a big 37.7, California 10.4, Colorado 18.8, Connecticut 23.9, Delaware 16.9, Florida 34.6, Georgia even stronger 46.7, Hawaii surprisingly had a similar margin of 46.1. In Idaho, that shifted 12.1. Illinois, 15.6. Indiana, 20.5. Iowa had a very small change relative to the other states, still shifting toward the Republicans by 4.9. Kansas back over double digits by 18.1. Kentucky, 22.5. Louisiana, a stronger 41.6. Maine, 33.2. Maryland, 25.6. Massachusetts, 21.1. Michigan had the exact same shift of 21.1. Minnesota, an even 18%. Mississippi had the biggest shift out of all the states. Take a look at that, shifting 68.1 toward the Republicans. That is a huge shift. Missouri had a small shift in comparison, but still moved by 23.4. Montana, 11%. Nebraska, 13%. Nevada, 19.2%. New Hampshire, 20.9%. New Jersey, 22.7%. New Mexico, 12.4%. New York, 22.8%. North Carolina, that lurched over 30 points, 32.4% toward the Republicans. North Dakota, they dialed it back a little bit, only 8.6% toward the Republicans. Ohio got redder by 19.3%. Oklahoma, redder still by 34%. Oregon had the smallest shift toward the Republicans by 4.2%. Pennsylvania, 23.6%. Rhode Island, blue state, but it shifted 38.4% toward the Republicans. South Carolina, same direction by 34.2%. South Dakota, that is the only state that shifted toward the Democrats. The likely factor there was George McGovern. He was a U.S. Senator from South Dakota. He still lost his home state by almost 10, but that actually resulted in a shift toward the Democrats by 2.7. Tennessee, back hard toward the Republicans by 28.1. Down in Texas, that moved right by 34.2. Utah shifted 21.8 toward the GOP. Vermont as well by 16.9. Virginia by 26.8. Washington by 20.4. West Virginia an even 36%. Wisconsin, a smaller shift there, 6.1 toward the Republicans, and in Wyoming, 18.2 away from the Democrats. And also we have Washington, D.C. here. That's normally extremely blue. This time in that landslide, it shifted 7.1 toward the Republicans. So those are all of the states and all of the shifts, and a lot of people find it helpful to visualize this data. So let's take it all, let's apply it to a map. Here it is. We've got the same shading. The darkest colors are 10 or more point shifts. The lightest colors are under 5-point shifts. So we have 3 levels of shading. And what are the takeaways from this map? Well, there's really only one. It's extremely red. Again, you go from a semi-close election in 68 to a complete landslide the following cycle, and you're going to see these kinds of shifts. South Dakota is the only slight bright spot for the Democrats. Only 3 states, Oregon, North Dakota, Iowa, and Wisconsin, plus D.C., did not shift double digits toward Nixon and the Republicans. The environment at the time, Nixon's popularity, everything just lined up to go hard toward the right, and that's what it did. All across the country, George McGovern was just not the guy to reduce these margins. It's crazy to see a landslide like this, something we don't expect to see these days, but this is what happened back then. There were some political realignments happening around that time. The South was becoming more Republican, but you wouldn't even really know it from this map. It looks like everybody loves the Republicans on this map, and as far as the shifts go, that's pretty much true. Nixon was the big hero. Of course, after that, Watergate happened, and everything fell apart, but there's not much else to say about these shifts. A lot of them were over 20 and 30 points. We even saw a couple over 60 points. That's really hard to imagine, but that's what happened in just 2 consecutive elections. And I think it goes without saying, Nixon did much better in his re-election attempt than he did the first time out. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about any of the shifts in any of these states? Any surprises? Anything you find fascinating? Let me know your thoughts down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next video.